Welcome to the SBI podcast. You are joining the most watched and listened to show dedicated to B2B revenue growth. My name is Melissa Valdez, the Director of Client Engagement for SBI. Our guest today is Dan Levinschi, the Head of Marketing for PandaDoc. Dan is a revenue-generating marketer who knows how to quickly transition from marketing strategy to execution. Hope you enjoy the show. From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to the SBI Podcast, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today we're going to demonstrate how to move from marketing strategy to marketing execution, and that's where the real goodness happens. My name is Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI, and I'm also your host. Joining me in the studio, as always, is my beloved co-host, Melissa Valdez. And Melissa is here to point you to resources to advance you along the way to making your number. Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Matt. Thank you to our audience for listening.
All right. So joining us today on the show is Dan Levinschi, and Dan is the Head of Marketing for PandaDoc. So Dan, first off, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking time to spend some time with us. And please introduce yourself and PandaDoc to the audience.
Thank you for having me. My name is Dan. I currently head the marketing department at PandaDoc. PandaDoc is a San Francisco startup. We're building a document management platform that streamlines your work with documents that are transactional in nature. That's proposal contracts. And before PandaDoc, I spent 7 years at Google working on developing their digital strategy for two products, Android in the US and AdWords in the UK and Ireland. And I'm very excited to be here.
So Dan, with a journey like that at a place like Google, I mean, talk about an innovation mindset to bring into marketing. So we're really thrilled to have you on the show. So thanks for taking the time to spend with us. Melissa, knowing that, can you help the audience make sure they know where to go so they can follow along with Dan and I?
I can do that. To our audience, if you have your 2018 How to Make Your Number workbook handy, please get that out and turn to the marketing strategy section on page 236. If you don't have this amazing workbook, go to sbi.tips/2018 workbook.
All right, let's jump into the questions, Dan. So in this first segment, Dan and I are going to talk about this move from marketing strategy to marketing execution. So Dan, I mean, having a solid strategy in place obviously sets a company up for success and sets a department up for success. How do you ensure that your marketing strategy is in interlock with the key functions of the corporate strategy, product, and sales, especially in hypergrowth environment like where you are at PandaDoc?
Yeah. So let me start by saying that there's no such thing as a marketing strategy. And I realize this might shock some people, but having spent some time in the corporate world and in the startup world, I realized that people tend to think about marketing strategy as a kind of like a standalone thing. And the marketing strategy is merely an extension of the company's wider strategy. So and I think it's important to outline this because most people, when they think about the strategy of a specific department, they just go and they have their own tactics. And then what you end up doing is you have a bunch of department heads, doing their own strategy, but it doesn't really tie into the bigger company strategy. Right. So there are a couple of things that I'm looking at. So first of all, all the department heads have to agree on the company's long-term strategy. For a startup, is generally, 6 to 24 months in advance because you have to fundraise and you can't really plan too far ahead. For bigger companies, generally, there are 3 timelines, 1 year out, 5 years out, 10 years out. And you might not have a very good idea what you're going to do 10 years from now, but at least you should shoot for something that's reasonable because that kind of sets the tone on how you approach the market. Second of all, every department has to have a KPI. For marketing, it can be, qualified leads, a specific volume, or, a number of opportunities. If you're in the B2B space, a specific, the new pipeline, and eventually revenue. And you always stick to, you plan for three scenarios: your best case scenario, your average, and your worst case scenario. Because most people tend to think, let's just go for the best case and we'll figure it out. And then what I normally do is once I understand the company's strategy, I run it by my directors, the marketing leads, and I get their buy-in, because each one of them has a deeper understanding of marketing in their particular area, like product or demand gen, so on and so forth. And then we start working on tactics. So those are the major ones.
So Dan, knowing that and this extension of the broader company strategy, how do you roll out what your function is going to do, the marketing function, to your team to make sure that everybody in your team has clarity relative to their role and their responsibility? And you mentioned product marketing, you mentioned demand gen. So let's use that as two examples, because that's mission critical for a company like PandaDoc.
Yeah, for sure. So I generally have kind of like three guiding principles. So the first one is, it is my responsibility to communicate what the high level company goals are to my department, right? If they don't understand what the company is shooting for, what the strategy is, it's actually that's my fault. So it's my responsibility. So that's step number one. Step number two, marketing as an organization should be able to support the other functions within organization. Otherwise, you're not going to have a very good understanding of how the business runs. In order to be a good, marketing leader, you can be a pro in marketing, but if you don't understand how sales works or how product works or how CS, you're not going to have the right impact. So the second thing is to make sure that you have one person that deals with a specific area of the business. For example, product marketing deals with the product department and engineering, demand generation with sales, customer marketing with the customer success, and so on and so forth. So in this way, the marketing department is able to understand how the rest of the business is functioning and identify any issues there. And then you go into tactics. Once you go into tactics, it's important to define the timelines, milestones, and specific deliverables for each department. So, whether it's product marketing or demand generation and so on and so forth. So those are the three guiding principles, and then you can approach any department and kind of set your strategy at that level.
Okay, so that's a great setup and place for us to take a break, Dan. Because when we come back, I know we're going to talk a little bit about once the strategy is set, we got to go into execution mindset. So Melissa's going to share a tool that the audience and our viewers can leverage. So Melissa, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yes, Matt. I'm excited to share this tool with our audience. SBI has developed a web-based self-assessment that allows you to assess your go-to-market strategy against the emerging best practices of market leaders. To get this fantastic tool, you will go to sbi.tips/revenue growth diagnostic, and the output of that is a roadmap to get you on the road to success in making your number.
All right. So you're listening to the SBI podcast. I'm your host, Matt Scherers, and today's guest is Dan Levinschi, and Dan is the head of marketing for PandaDoc. So in this segment, Dan and I are going to focus on, now that the strategy is set, I've got functional interlock with my team and product and sales, and I'm an extension of the corporate strategy. How do I go and execute? So, Dan, how do you transition into this planned execution mode? What does that look like?
So the execution is actually my favorite part, because you can whiteboard all day long. You can have an amazing strategy, but if you can't execute it, it's you're essentially not doing anything. So in order to execute, it's very important to have certain things in place. So first of all, you have to implement an OKR system, and this is something that's being used within Google, actually. An OKR is an objective and key result. So essentially, for any project that you're starting or for any major objective you're trying to achieve, you should be able to quantify it. So you should have a key result associated with it. So you can always say we're going to have more market share, more brand awareness, but what is the key result? Is it aided awareness, unaided, and so on and so forth? So you have to outline the company OKRs and break them down so everyone in your department understands it. One OKR could be 20% growth in MRR, or any metric you choose, and then you isolate each one of those OKRs, the high level of company, and you identify a number of tactics that would help you reach the OKR. So, for example, if you want to break into the mid-market, right, one tactic could be doing account-based marketing and or email outbound marketing, so on and so forth. So for every tactic, so I'm kind of drilling down now. Yeah. So every tactic, you need to have a number of KPIs. So KPIs could be a specific number of leads or specific conversion rates. And once you outline this plan within your department, what you have to do next is to estimate your resources, timelines, and identify the milestones. And resources could be human resources, how many people you need on the team to deliver on this, and budget. Timelines, is this going to take a month? Is this going to take half a year?
Right.
And you have to plan for the work, right? And the milestones, this one is very, very important. Like usually I go for a very specific, strict cadence of milestones. Every week, every 2 weeks, I want to see some progress. And another important thing is that each tactic or projects can have only one decision maker. And this is extremely important because I've seen the same problem over and over again. Like, for example, they would have a project, we need to increase our revenue, so the head of marketing and head of sales are going to be responsible for this. When you have two decision makers, either one of them checks out or two of them checks out, or right, both of them are starting to compete, for whatever. So and then you need regular check-ins, as I mentioned, and the check-ins have to be against the targets. You set the target for your team and you look, where are you? And it's the last but not least, it's very important to build specific processes within your department that are followed for everyone. So whenever people encounter any issue on delivering a specific tactic or a project, some people might go and collaborate with their colleagues. Some people might go and ask you directly. Some people might just not talk about it or complain about it. And you want to make sure that everyone has the same kind of expectation on how to approach a problem. And this kind of gives you a very good, foundation to start executing right, once you have those things in place.
So Dan, so I can take from that is you're setting up these KPIs to ensure that you've got this kind of closed loop reporting that's built into this. So, and you were rattling off a few of those KPIs. I think the takeaway for the audience is whatever objective you have, you've got to have a key result, your OKR. Love that, I wrote that down. And number one, and number two, then you've got to be iterating and making changes, especially when you're in hypergrowth mode and you're in execution mode like you.
Correct. Yes.
So then how do you think about progress? How do you ensure that progress is being made on major initiatives without micromanaging the team?
That's a good one. So
thank you.
It is very important for me personally, knowing what everyone on the team is doing without being too invasive. And I kind of worked out a system which is pretty good for me, but could not work for someone else. But just to share. So the number one thing that you need to have is you need to have a playbook for how your department functions. Yep. If people don't understand how your department functions, it doesn't matter whether they're on your team or a separate department. You will always run into the problem of people not knowing what you do, essentially. You also have to build an internal wiki page with all things marketing, just for the company.
Like that.
And this is pretty widespread in larger companies. I know it's pretty widespread in the big tech companies, and I think startups are kind of picking up on this trend. So in this way, if anyone in the company has a question to marketing, you don't want them to just go and for them to disturb your team members. You want them to go to the website, they try to answer the question there. And then you need to have a project management system in place, right? If you're if you're a startup, on a budget, you can use something like Trello.
Yep.
If you want something more advanced, you can use Jira. One more thing is that it's very important to provide feedback on the spot. And, this is not micromanagement. Feedback on the spot. It means that if you're identifying a problem, it's best to take a little bit of time now to give that feedback, as opposed to thinking, I'm going to talk to them next month, and then you forget about it. And then in the longer run, you actually end up wasting more time just constantly trying to deliver that feedback. Another thing, you have to focus on the core problems,
right,
and helping the people to understand the impact of their work. Some people would just go to work, for a paycheck, and they would just do the minimum necessary. And if they understand very well what the impact on the work is, they'll be a lot more motivated. And I found out that when people are motivated, you actually don't need to, you can give them a lot of responsibilities and freedom, and they'll spend their time on the right things. And the last one is communicate. I think there are lots of problems arising while people not communicating. So for me, what I do is I generally watch my team's operations and projects in the project management system.
Yep.
And then I just deliver feedback either on the spot or through the managers. I try not to get too much into the weeds, because I know that micromanagement is something that's very, very annoying to many people, and I try to avoid this.
Okay, very good. All right, so Dan and I are going to take another quick break, and this is going to allow Melissa to share with you another resource to help you on your way to making your number. So,
yes.
Miss Melissa,
yes,
take it away.
Absolutely. Great discussion so far. If anyone is out there inspired by Dan's emerging best practices for agile marketing, I encourage you to enlist the help of your SBI team of experts. Our subject matter experts would be happy to host you for an interactive workshop. To get a feel for what is covered in these workshops, you can go to sbi.tips/2018 workbook.
All right, we're here with Dan Levinschi, the head of marketing for PandaDoc, demonstrating how to transition from strategy to execution. In our final segment, we're going to focus on iteration and reporting progress. Dan and I are going to have a little fun. I'm going to do a little yes-no rapid fire at him. So Dan, as you think about agile, and it's a term that everybody likes to throw around, and things like iteration and rapid iteration and prototyping, and one of my partners always says, agile doesn't give you an excuse to be sloppy. So, knowing that as the context, as an agile plan is rolled out, number one, do you believe that iteration in 30 days or less is the right cadence?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
All right, very good. And then relative to that 30 days, we talk about accountability with the marketing team and sort of encouraging the team with the goals. How do you ensure that they're empowered when they're coming back to you with a suggestion and you're saying, nope, I disagree. So I've come to you 30 days, I've got some metrics, you disagree. Who wins the fight and how?
That's a good question. So the way we normally work is I believe in open forums, right? So I think that the best ideas are born where you have a number of viewpoints in the same room. So with us, what we do right now is basically whenever there's an argument where we should continue a project or not, the results are not there. The question number one that I'm asking is what is the immediate impact on business, short term and long term? And if the impact is minimal, right? And generally impact is you can quantify through specific metrics. Generally, right. It all comes down to revenue. Then it's a simple argument for me to win, right? If there is a way to believe that there is an impact, then for me, I generally look at for example, the impact is short term, but in long term this doesn't make any sense. Maybe we should kill the project and reiterate. So to kind of like to summarize, I'm a performance marketer. So I believe in numbers. If you cannot prove it to me in numbers, then the argument generally ends.
Yeah. So then on that point, do you have a weekly call with the CEO?
Yes.
All right.
Weeklies.
So weekly call or weekly meeting, one-on-one, come into the CEO. CEO says, Dan, how are we doing? Are there 3 to 5 metrics that you're using to measure success that you could share with the audience, whether it was things you did at Google when you were running that cadence or what you're doing now at PandaDoc?
Yeah. So first of all, when I'm meeting with the CEO and we're checking on the progress, everything that I'm showing is usually through a report. So I should be able to show a dashboard that would speak for itself. And generally, if the CEO doesn't know about specific metrics, like that's a problem that I should tackle.
Right.
And usually, for every business is very different. But for SaaS, for example, revenue growth is one. How we're growing it weekly, monthly, quarterly, and what's the projection for the rest of the year. For a SaaS business, it's very important to watch your MRR, right? So and the ARR goals, the annual revenue rates. So that's another set of metrics. Churn is another thing we're always looking at because with a subscription model, anyone can just subscribe and then unsubscribe. Yeah. So. And for marketing, as you know, as most of the dollars are getting dumped into marketing, then the burn rate is always a metric you have to watch, and profitability by channel. Those are the main ones.
All right. So Dan, I got to thank you for taking time out of a busy day to drop in and spend some with Melissa and I, and obviously I want to thank the SBI audience. You have a choice in who you listen to and who you watch, and I appreciate you truly sharing some time with us and being part of the SBI community. So Dan, thanks so much for dropping some insight to the audience. Continued success. Melissa, I think you have one more thing to share with the team before we go.
Yes, just one last thing for our audience. If you are new and are just tuning in for the first time, I encourage you to become a member of the SBI community. You can do that by going to salesbenchmarkindex.com/register, and there you can select the topics of interest to you and when you would like to receive content. And that's all I got today, Matt.
All right, so that's it for today, folks. Once again, Dan, thanks for spending time with us. Wishing you all the best and continued success. And as always, to our listeners and our viewers, until next time, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.